Hello, and welcome back to Velvet Haunt. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy chilling tales that linger in the velvet dark, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. The hat was the first thing Jessica noticed. In Nashville, it was unusual to see someone wearing a UNLV cap. Most people wore Tennessee Titans shirts, orange University of Tennessee gear, or hats connected to one of the nearby SEC teams. Those clothes were so common that they blended into the city like camouflage. A UNLV hat stood out. Jessica only noticed it for a few seconds before her attention returned to the friends around her. She was sitting with a group of co-workers and drinking buddies, laughing over the loud music and trying to follow 3 different conversations at once. The man wearing the hat was sitting alone near the end of the bar. There was nothing especially frightening about him. He appeared to be in his 30s, with a trimmed beard, short hair, and a red and black flannel shirt. He was drinking slowly and looking toward the crowded room. Jessica forgot about him almost immediately. If it had been later in the night, after several more drinks, she probably would not have remembered him at all. The group stayed at the first bar for about 45 minutes before someone suggested moving on. That was normal on Broadway Street. There were so many bars packed together that people rarely stayed in one place for long. Some buildings had live country bands on the first floor, dance clubs upstairs, and rooftop bars above that. A person could spend an entire night walking only a few blocks and still visit 6 or 7 different places. Jessica and her friends finished their drinks, closed their tab, and joined the river of people moving down the sidewalk. Broadway was already crowded. Music poured out through open doors. Neon signs glowed above the street. Bachelorette parties in matching shirts shouted at one another. Men in cowboy hats moved between groups of tourists. Pedal taverns rolled past with drunk passengers singing badly. Mounted police watched from the sides of the road while traffic slowly crawled through the chaos. The group entered another bar and managed to find a place near the back. Jessica was halfway through her next drink when she saw the man again. He was sitting at the end of the bar. At first, she only recognized his face. Then she noticed that the UNLV cap was gone. She stared at him for a moment, trying to decide whether he was really the same person. His beard looked the same. His build looked the same. He was still wearing the flannel shirt. Broadway had dozens of bars. Thousands of people came through the area every night. Seeing the same stranger twice was not impossible, but it was strange enough to catch her attention. Maybe he was doing what they were doing, she thought. Maybe he was simply moving from bar to bar with his own friends. Perhaps he had friends somewhere else in the building. The explanation was reasonable. She pushed the thought away. An hour or 2 passed. The group moved upstairs to a dance floor with a balcony overlooking the street. The bar was full, and the second floor shook beneath the weight of people dancing to the live band. Jessica stood near the balcony railing and finished her drink. From above, Broadway looked like one giant party. People danced on the sidewalks. Music from different bars mixed together into a loud wall of sound. Flashing signs covered the buildings. Every few seconds, someone screamed, laughed, or started singing. It was everything the advertisements promised. When 2 members of the group called for another bar, everyone agreed. They closed their tab and walked down the stairs. Jessica glanced toward the seat where the man had been sitting. He was gone. A woman wearing a bride-to-be sash was now standing there. waving desperately at a bartender who continued to ignore her. Jessica felt a small sense of relief, though she did not know why. The group fought its way through the crowd and stepped back onto the street. They walked for a few minutes before entering another bar. This one was just as packed as the others, but they were lucky enough to find an empty pub table in one of the back corners. Jessica volunteered to help get the first round. Nelson, one of her newer co-workers, went with her. Nelson had only moved to Nashville a few months earlier. He was still new to the company and had accepted every invitation to go out because he wanted to make friends. He was friendly, talkative, and always ready to turn a serious moment into a joke. He was also one of the designated drivers that night. He had picked Jessica up from her apartment before they went downtown, and he had promised to drive her home when the night was over. They squeezed into 2 empty stools at the bar and tried to get the bartender's attention. Behind the bottles, a long mirror ran across the wall just below the ceiling. Jessica liked those mirrors. They allowed her to watch the room without turning around. While waiting for the bartender, she often entertained herself by observing drunk strangers. She looked at what appeared to be a nervous first date at one table. Then she noticed 2 men arguing about something that was probably related to sports or politics. Farther away, a tired-looking woman was trying to keep her extremely drunk husband from falling off his chair. Jessica's gaze continued across the mirror. When she saw the man beside the pool table, her eyes narrowed. It was him. He was standing alone, facing a group of people playing pool. The UNLV cap was still missing. His flannel shirt was now turned inside out, hiding the pattern, and the sleeves had been rolled up to his elbows. Jessica sat perfectly still. Seeing the same person in 3 bars on Broadway was no longer easy to dismiss. The street was too large, the bars were too crowded, and there were too many choices. More importantly, he was changing his appearance. There were at least 30 customers and staff members between them. Yet Jessica suddenly felt as though she and the stranger were the only 2 people in the building. She nudged Nelson. "Hey?" Nelson looked at her. "You see the guy in the back near the pool table?" she asked. "Flannel shirt, rolled sleeves, beard?" Nelson started turning around on his stool. Jessica elbowed him much harder than she meant to. "Ow," he said through his teeth. "Sorry. Don't turn around. Use the mirror." Nelson looked up at the mirror and searched the room. After a few seconds, he found the man. "Yeah, I see him," he said. "What about him? Do you need a wingman?" "No." Nelson smiled. "Good-looking guy, strong beard. Man of mystery. Are you sure?" Jessica elbowed him again. "This is the 3rd bar in a row where I've seen him," she said. "Now he's changing his clothes between places." Nelson's smile weakened slightly. "He could just be bar hopping, too." "Look around us," Jessica said. "This place is packed. Broadway is packed. There are dozens of bars, but he keeps ending up in the same one as us. First, he removed the hat. Now his shirt is turned around, and his sleeves are rolled up. That doesn't seem strange to you?" Nelson looked at the mirror again. He did not appear convinced, but he did not know what to say. He finally shrugged. Jessica felt irritation rise inside her, but it was mixed with uneasiness. She did not feel in immediate danger. The room was crowded, her friends were nearby, and police officers were constantly walking along Broadway. Still, something felt wrong. The bartender finally reached them. Jessica and Nelson ordered drinks for the group and began carrying them back toward the table. As they moved through the crowd, Jessica looked toward the man one more time. A chill ran down her spine. He was not watching the pool game. His body was facing the table, but his eyes were looking beyond it. A reflective metal sign was hanging on the wall beside the players. The man was watching Jessica in the reflection. She quickly looked away before their eyes could meet. For a moment, her knees felt weak. When she returned to the table, she struggled to follow the conversation. She kept thinking about the stranger and what she should do. She wanted to leave. The problem was that the night was still young. Everyone had planned to stay out much later. If no one else wanted to go, she would have to leave alone. That idea frightened her even more. Would the others believe her? Would they think she was drunk, paranoid, or trying to play a joke? Her back was turned toward the rest of the bar, which made her feel exposed. She tried not to look behind her too often, but she checked twice in less than a minute. Jennifer, one of the women in the group, noticed. Jessica gave her a small shrug and pretended nothing was wrong. The group ordered another round and then another. Mallory eventually announced that it was time to find the next bar. As everyone began moving away from the table, Jessica grabbed Nelson's sleeve. He looked at her in confusion. "Remember the guy?" she whispered. Nelson smirked. "Changed your mind? Should I invite him to the next bar?" Jessica's fear turned into anger. "No, asshole. At the next place. Keep an eye out for him. If he shows up again, it is not a coincidence." Nelson studied her face. "Fair enough." His answer did not make her feel better. It still sounded as though he was only agreeing to calm her down. They rounded the corner to catch up with the group. Jessica looked toward the pool table. The man was gone. Nelson looked in the same direction and noticed his absence. Instead of feeling safe, Jessica felt worse. It was like standing in the middle of the ocean and knowing a predator was somewhere beneath the water. She could not see him, but that did not mean he was gone. As they left the bar, Jessica barely heard anything her friend said. Her eyes moved from face to face in the crowd. Whenever she could, she looked behind her to see whether anyone was following. She did not see the man. Nelson and Jessica entered the next bar at the back of the group. Everyone stopped near the front door while deciding where to stand. Because Jessica had entered last, her back was toward the entrance. Her nervousness immediately increased. She leaned forward as if she were trying to speak to Megan, another co-worker. But the music was too loud. Jessica used that as an excuse to trade places with Jennifer. The new position gave her a clear view of the front door. She looked toward Nelson. He understood. She was watching for the stranger. Then Jessica turned her head to the left. Her stomach dropped. A large window beside her offered a clear view of Broadway. Outside, the street was packed with the usual mix of tourists, bridesmaids, football fans, cowboy hats, and police officers. Across the street, leaning against a lamppost, stood the man. He was smoking a cigarette. His face was turned toward the window, toward her. He did not need to enter the bar. Jessica was standing in plain view. She tried to get Nelson's attention, but he was speaking with Jennifer. The music was loud, and he never looked in her direction. Jessica stood beside the window for what felt like an hour, though it was probably only a few minutes. She kept looking at the man across the street. He did not move. Her drink remained almost untouched. Whatever pleasant buzz she had felt earlier was completely gone. She sent Nelson a text. "The man is outside across the street. He is watching us." Nelson did not check his phone. Maybe his notifications were silenced. Maybe he was too involved in the conversation. Jessica looked outside again. The man pushed away from the lamppost and began walking toward the bar. Fear and hope hit her at the same time. If Nelson saw him enter, then he would finally understand that she was not imagining things. but Nelson's back was turned. The stranger walked through the front door and passed within a few feet of the group. Nelson never noticed him. The man continued toward the bar and sat on the only empty stool. Jessica decided to go to the restroom. She hoped her movement would catch Nelson's attention. Maybe she could glance toward the stranger and silently point him out. Nelson did not look at her. The path to the restroom took Jessica within a few feet of the man. She felt like a deer trying to sneak past a hungry bear. She forced herself not to run. She kept her eyes ahead and tried to hide the fear on her face. The man did not speak to her. She passed him, turned into the hallway, and hurried into the women's restroom. Jessica entered the farthest stall and locked the door. She pulled out her phone and sent several messages to Nelson. He is inside. At the bar. Please look. It is the same guy. Check your phone. Every message showed as delivered. None showed as read. Jessica's uneasiness became panic. She wanted to be anywhere else. She wanted to be home with the doors locked and the curtains closed. She took a deep breath, held it for 4 seconds, and slowly breathed out. She told herself that she was not alone. Her friends were only a short distance away. The bar was full. She could ask security for help if she needed it. She decided she would return to the group and stay in the middle of them for the rest of the night. Jessica flushed the toilet, even though she had not used it. She washed her hands and stepped out of the restroom. Nelson was waiting in the hallway. "You're right," he said quietly. "I see him. What do you want to do?" Relief moved through her body, but it did not remove the fear. "Let's just go back to the table." "Should we tell everyone?" Jessica hesitated. "No, I don't know. Maybe I need to think." "They're not going to think you're crazy," Nelson said. "You did until you saw him again." "I didn't think you were crazy. You were making jokes." "I thought it was probably a coincidence. Now I don't." Jessica looked toward the main room. "I don't need everyone at work thinking I'm paranoid." "But you're not paranoid," Nelson said. "This is real. Even if we are completely wrong about what he wants, your concern makes sense." "We're not telling anyone," Jessica said. "Not yet." She tried to sound confident, but her voice shook. They returned to the group. Jessica took her previous position so she could watch the man at the bar. Nelson went back to joking and telling stories, though she could now see that he was also checking the room. 2 more rounds passed. The group decided to move again. This time, Nelson and Jessica had a plan. If the man followed them to one more bar, they would tell everyone. They would also speak to one of the many police officers on Broadway and then leave for the night. They knew the police might not be able to arrest him. The man had not threatened anyone or committed a crime. Still, informing an officer seemed safer than doing nothing. The group went through the familiar process again. They pushed through the crowd, gathered near the front door, crossed the busy sidewalk, and entered another bar. Jessica and Nelson watched the street as carefully as they could. They did not see the man. Inside, the group found a place far from the entrance. Jessica flinched every time someone new walked through the door. There were at least 50 people between her and the entrance, but the building might as well have been empty. She felt alone. The group was beginning to notice the tension between her and Nelson, though no one asked about it. After a while, the conversation helped Jessica relax slightly. The alcohol also softened the edges of her fear. Maybe she had overreacted. Maybe she had become too focused on the man and started believing that everything he did was connected to her. There was a phrase she had heard online, main character syndrome. It described people who believed every event around them was somehow about them. Perhaps that was what she was doing. Maybe the stranger was not following her at all. The thought made her feel embarrassed. Then she needed to use the restroom and found herself afraid to leave the group. Her anxiety returned immediately. Her instincts told her to stay in the crowd. Remain surrounded by people. Do not become isolated. The night stopped being fun. Minutes stretched into hours. Jessica stood with her friends, but her mind was somewhere else. She did not notice when Nelson left to use the restroom. She did notice the expression on his face when he returned. He looked directly at her. No explanation was needed. The man was there again. Jessica took out her phone. She opened the group chat and began typing. Everyone. I know this is going to sound strange, but Nelson and I are seriously worried. There is a man here who has been at every bar we have visited tonight. He has changed parts of his outfit each time. Broadway is packed, and there are too many places for this to keep happening by accident. I do not know who he is following, but I am scared. I think we should all close our tabs and leave together. I am also going to tell one of the police officers outside. They may not be able to do anything, but it is better than saying nothing. Please do not talk about this out loud. Just act normal and leave together. She sent the message. Then she raised her phone and pointed at it so everyone would check the group chat. Their expressions changed as they read. Some looked confused. A few looked skeptical. Others immediately appeared concerned. Nelson read the message and added his own. I saw him on the way back from the restroom. He is wearing a flannel shirt over some kind of band t-shirt, jeans, and black boots. Short hair, beard. Close your tabs. We are leaving together. The group followed the instructions, though several people clearly wanted answers. No one said anything out loud. One by one, they paid their bills and moved toward the exit. What they did not see was the man leaving the bar ahead of them. Jessica and Nelson were the last to step outside. Before leaving, they looked through the room. The man was gone. The fear in Jessica's stomach became heavier. Once outside, the group began walking toward the end of Broadway. The two sober drivers had parked several blocks away. Everyone else planned to order rideshares. At first, the group stayed close together. Then they slowly began to separate. Some walked faster. Others stopped to check their phones. A few became distracted by food stands or people they recognized. Jessica remained alert, but searching for one person in the crowd was almost impossible. She could barely see 10 feet ahead of her. The sidewalk was a sea of intoxicated strangers. That gave her a tiny amount of comfort. If she could not see the man, perhaps he could not see her. The walk felt endless. Eventually, the group reached a quieter area away from the center of Broadway. One by one, their friends climbed into rideshare vehicles. Nelson was one of the designated drivers, and Jessica was riding with him. After the last of the others left, Nelson motioned for her to follow him toward his car. The street was almost silent compared to Broadway. The music was now distant. Only a few people were nearby, and most businesses were closed. Jessica immediately felt exposed. They were about a block from Nelson's car when she noticed a figure behind them. A man was walking on the same side of the street, several buildings away. She could only see his outline, but his shape looked familiar. Jessica grabbed Nelson's arm. I think he's behind us. Nelson looked back briefly. Keep walking. They increased their pace. Nelson reached into his pocket and pressed the unlock button on his key. Less than a block away, the lights on his car flashed. Jessica's heart was pounding so hard that she could hear it. Then two shadows stepped out of an alley. Everything happened at once. One man moved between Jessica and Nelson. The second man rushed forward and tackled Nelson to the ground. Nelson shouted. Jessica screamed. The man on the ground began yelling at Nelson while trying to pin his arms behind his back. Jessica turned. The stranger from the bars was sprinting toward them, her knees bent as she prepared to run. Before she could turn, the man standing beside her wrapped both arms around her body and lifted her from the ground. Her arms were pinned against her sides. Her feet kicked uselessly in the air. She had nothing to push against. "No!" she screamed. "Let me go! Leave us alone!" Nelson was shouting. The men were shouting. The stranger reached them. Jessica looked directly into his face. Terror twisted her features. "What do you want from us?" she cried. She did not notice what he was holding until he moved closer. In his extended hand was a gold badge pressed into a square leather case. Jessica stopped struggling. Her fear shifted into confusion. Why would a kidnapper carry a police badge? The shouting around her suddenly became clear. The man on top of Nelson was telling him that he was under arrest. Nelson was demanding to know why. The man holding Jessica spoke close to her ear. "Ma'am, calm down. You are safe. I'm going to set you down when you stop fighting." The strength left Jessica's body. Her legs stopped kicking. The officer lowered her carefully to the sidewalk, but kept one hand on her arm. Everything felt unreal. A moment earlier, she had believed she was being kidnapped. Now Nelson was face down on the ground with his hands being forced behind his back. "Ma'am," the officer said, "my name is Officer Collins. Your friend is being arrested for several very serious crimes." Jessica stared at him. She could not understand the words. Nelson was her co-worker. He had driven her downtown. He was supposed to take her home. The stranger from the bars stepped closer. "Good evening, ma'am. My name is Agent Wilson." Jessica looked up at him with fear and disbelief. He was the man who had followed them from bar to bar. He had changed his clothes. He had watched her through reflections. Agent Wilson spoke carefully. "In the trunk of Nelson's vehicle, we found medical restraints designed for wrists and ankles. We also found duct tape, several cleaning products, and a collection of tools and knives." Jessica stared toward Nelson's car. The trunk was open. Another officer stood beside it wearing gloves. Agent Wilson continued. "Nelson has been a suspect in an investigation involving several kidnappings and extremely violent murders. We believe you may have been his next target." Jessica felt the sidewalk move beneath her feet. She reached for the wall of a nearby building. "A search warrant is being carried out at his home right now," Agent Wilson said. "We have been watching him throughout the night. We needed to confirm his movements and make sure you were protected." Police lights filled the street. A patrol car blocked traffic while a police SUV waited nearby. Nelson had been placed in handcuffs. Two officers lifted him from the ground and began leading him toward the SUV. Jessica wanted to say something, but no words came. She had believed Agent Wilson was hunting her. All night she had thought the strange man was the danger. Meanwhile, Nelson had stayed beside her, joked with her, comforted her, and promised to drive her home. She thought she might faint. Another agent guided her away from the vehicles and began asking questions. How long had she known Nelson? Had he ever been inside her apartment? Had she told him where she lived? Had he driven her home before? Jessica answered as well as she could. She explained that Nelson was new to the company. They were not especially close. He had only been to her apartment building that night when he picked her up. At least, that was what she believed. While she was being interviewed, Information began arriving from the officers searching Nelson's house. The unfinished basement had been changed into something that looked like a room from a horror movie. A camera tripod stood at one end of the basement, pointed toward a stainless steel table. The floor was covered with thick plastic sheets. Similar plastic had been attached to the walls. It could be cut down, folded, and thrown away after use. Medical restraints were stored inside a drawer. There were cleaning chemicals, gloves, ropes, cutting tools, and several containers that had not yet been identified. Those discoveries were horrifying, but they were not the worst thing the police found. On one wall of the basement were photographs of Jessica. They were not pictures taken from her social media accounts. They were photographs Nelson had taken himself. One showed Jessica shopping for groceries. Another showed her walking through the company parking lot after work. Several had been taken outside her apartment building. There was a photograph of her standing in her living room, taken through the window. Another showed her changing the channel on her television. One had been taken through her bedroom window. The final photograph showed Jessica asleep on her couch. Unlike the others, that picture had not been taken from outside. The angle was too close. Someone had been standing inside her apartment. Jessica stopped breathing for a moment. The agent speaking to her placed a hand near her shoulder, but did not touch her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Jessica could not answer. She remembered every time Nelson had smiled at work, every harmless joke, every conversation in the break room, every moment that evening when he had acted as though her fear was amusing. She remembered how he had volunteered to drive, how he had picked her up at her apartment, how he had repeatedly encouraged her not to tell the group. At first she believed he had simply not taken her seriously. Now she understood. He had wanted to keep her isolated. If Agent Wilson had not followed them into every bar, Jessica would have left with Nelson alone. She would have climbed into his car. She would have trusted him to drive her home. Instead, he would have taken her somewhere else. Jessica turned toward the police SUV. Nelson was sitting in the back seat. His face was visible through the window. He was looking directly at her. His expression was empty at first. There was no guilt, fear, or apology in his eyes. Then his face changed. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. The calm mask disappeared, revealing a deep, violent anger. He stared at Jessica as if she had betrayed him, as if everything that had happened was her fault. The SUV began to move. Nelson continued watching her through the glass until the vehicle turned the corner and disappeared. Jessica's legs gave way. She fell to her knees on the sidewalk and began to cry. For the entire night, she had feared the man who kept appearing in every bar. She had watched him remove his hat, reverse his shirt, roll up his sleeves, and observe her through mirrors. She had believed he was hiding his identity because he wanted to hurt her. She had been right about one thing. Someone had been following her. She had simply been watching the wrong man. Story 2. Charlie Delacroix had always trusted bad feelings. They were not ordinary nervous thoughts or the kind of fear people felt before an important exam. His bad feelings came suddenly, wrapping themselves around his stomach and squeezing until he could barely breathe. They usually arrived before something terrible happened. When Charlie was 16 and counting down the days until graduation, one of those feelings struck him during dinner. He sat at the long dining table while his father talked loudly about something Charlie was not supposed to understand. The room smelled of roasted meat, expensive wine, and the strong perfume his mother wore every evening. Everything looked normal, at least by Delacroix family standards. Then the dread hit him. It was so strong that his fork slipped from his fingers. Charlie knew, without understanding how, that he was about to become an orphan. "Dad," he said. It was the first time in his life that he had spoken over his father. He regretted it immediately. His mother stood so quickly that her chair scraped across the floor. She picked up her glass of wine and threw its contents over Charlie's head. The cold liquid ran through his hair, down his face, and into the collar of his shirt. Charlie wanted to cry. Instead, he forced himself to smile. His mother demanded that he smile throughout dinner, no matter what happened. A sad face was embarrassing. Anger was disrespectful. Fear was weakness. "There's someone outside," Charlie said through clenched teeth. His voice shook despite his effort to control it. He had watched his father kill people since he was a toddler. Some of Charlie's earliest memories were of sitting in front of Cartoon Network while a person screamed on the other side of the room. His father would work behind him as though murder were no different from repairing furniture. Blades flashed. Blood struck the walls. Once, Charlie looked away from the television just in time to see a man's head fall onto the floor. Blood sprayed from the neck like water from a broken pipe. Charlie had quickly turned back to the cartoon. That was how most afternoons worked in the Delacroix home. The maid collected Charlie from school and brought him back to the enormous family house. He completed his homework, ate a snack, and watched television while waiting for dinner. Halfway through the meal, his father usually arrived with a duffel bag thrown over one shoulder. The bag was often moving. Sometimes it kicked against his back. Sometimes a muffled voice came from inside. Charlie never asked who was in it or why they had been brought there. He had been raised to understand that he was a child, and his parents handled adult business. Children were not supposed to interrupt adult business. They were not supposed to ask questions. Still, Charlie was curious like every other child. He saw more than his parents realized. He noticed the wet, heavy sound the duffel bag made when it hit the floor. He saw his father pull out a knife and drive it through the fabric. He watched a dark red patch slowly spread beneath the bag. "Having fun, kid?" his father once asked with a laugh. He stabbed the bag again. More blood splashed onto the floor. The movement inside stopped. "Yes, Father," Charlie replied loudly, keeping his eyes fixed on the television. "Good." His father straightened and wiped the blade on his shirt. "Want to come watch?" "I'm watching Adventure Time." His father chuckled. "Come over here, kid. I'll show you the basics." Charlie knew he had no choice. His father had made several rules very clear, and obedience was one of the most important. "Okay," Charlie said. He stood and walked across the room. With each step, his legs threatened to collapse. The smell of blood filled his nose and burned the back of his throat. Charlie kept smiling when his father put an arm around his shoulders and pulled him closer. The body on the floor no longer looked human. Charlie swallowed the vomit rising in his throat. His stomach twisted violently, but he refused to react. At school, he had learned basic anatomy from colorful diagrams and plastic models. At home, he received a much closer education. He saw the real cracks, layers, and hidden spaces inside the human body. During one biology lesson, Charlie's teacher pointed to parts of a model and asked the class to name them. She was visibly surprised when Charlie confidently shouted every correct answer. He even corrected her. "That's not the whole brain," he said. "That part is the cerebellum." His teacher had stared at him. Charlie stared back, confused about why she did not mention the fluid and tissue he had seen around a real cerebellum. That was when he understood that school education and home education were very different things. The mass of flesh at Charlie's feet had once been a person. Its skull had been crushed, and what remained of its brain floated in a pool of red. His father kicked the body onto its side. "Like what you see, Charlie?" Charlie's eyes searched the wound. He could not see any clear brain fluid this time. "One day," his father continued, "all of this will be yours." Charlie nodded because that was what his father wanted. Then he stepped back to avoid a stream of blood moving toward his shoes. "I can't wait, Dad." "Good." His father handed him a mop and bucket. "Clean this mess up." Charlie had always been observant. Even as a young child, he understood that people were afraid of his parents. Teachers avoided speaking to them for too long. Other parents looked away whenever they entered a school event. His private piano teacher never stayed in the house after a lesson ended. Charlie was not surprised. He had been instructed to call his father Dad. To the rest of the world, his father was Noah Delacroix, a powerful member of one of the largest and most dangerous crime organizations in Queens. To Charlie, Noah was his personal monster. He was more than 6 feet tall, with long, thin limbs and a smooth, bald head that seemed as sharp as a blade. He had hollow eyes and a wide smile that never carried any warmth. Charlie imagined that if the creature beneath his bed ever stepped into the light, it would look exactly like his father. His mother, Delilah Delacroix, was frightening in a different way. She had beautiful golden hair that fell far down her back. She was at least 10 years younger than Noah and cared deeply about how other people saw her. When Charlie was 5, he sat on her knee during a family Christmas party in the Hamptons. "Why are you so much younger than Daddy?" he asked innocently. His older cousins, Jasper and Lou, burst out laughing. His mother slapped Charlie across the face. The blow knocked him from her knee. He was sent upstairs to the luxury bedroom his parents had arranged for him. Expensive toys filled the room, and the bed was large enough for 3 children, but Charlie had never felt safe there. He sat on the floor playing Super Mario until his mother came to see him. She first appeared as a shape behind the partly open door. Charlie pretended not to notice her. He pressed the buttons harder, although Mario had stopped moving on the screen. Each time Charlie glanced toward the door, his mother's shadow seemed closer. Finally, he reached for the lamp and switched it on. A shiver passed through him. Delilah stood inside the room, barefoot and gently swaying. A smile stretched across her mouth. "Hello, baby." She sat at the end of Charlie's bed. Without being told, Charlie pulled back the covers and crawled toward her. He knew she would force him if he refused. "Are your cheeks still stinging, sweetie?" she asked. Her voice had changed into the high, mocking tone Charlie privately called her evil voice. He nodded. His cheek did not hurt very much anymore, but part of him still wanted his mother to comfort him. Delilah ran her long fingernails across his face. "Mommy had her nails done," she whispered. "The polish is very special. It was made with a powerful and dangerous snake venom." Charlie stopped breathing. "It kills naughty little brats who listen to adult conversations." She pulled him close as though she were hugging him. Then her arms tightened. Charlie's chest compressed under her grip. Her breath touched his neck as she squeezed him like a snake, wrapping around its prey. He did not fight. He carefully breathed out, hoping to make enough room to take another breath. He resisted the urge to struggle, because struggling always made her angrier. Her arms tightened again. Tears filled Charlie's eyes. Just as darkness began forming at the edges of his vision, Delilah released him. Charlie crawled away, taking silent, desperate breaths. His mother reached after him and dragged her nails down his arm hard enough to leave burning lines. "If you embarrass me again," she said, "I will slap you so hard that you'll see stars." Then she stood and left the room. "Good night, baby," she called cheerfully from the hallway. "Good night," Charlie answered. That was the night he realized he had to escape. He made himself a promise. When he was old enough and smart enough, he would leave his family behind. Despite the blood, violence, and fear surrounding him, Charlie's childhood sometimes appeared almost normal from the outside. His parents were rich, so he received anything money could buy. He had the newest game systems, designer clothes, private lessons, and bedrooms in several family properties. Puberty changed everything. As Charlie grew older, Noah began paying more attention to him. Charlie was invited into his father's office to attend meetings and take notes. He was allowed to ride in the back of the car with his cousin. Simon had already killed his first person and talked about it as though he had won a football match. Lou lived under constant pressure from her mother, who had ordered her either to produce a male heir for the family or leave it entirely. Charlie understood what was happening. These were not friendly family visits. His father was not trying to spend more time with him. This was training. Noah had started shaping Charlie into the next Delacroix heir. For Charlie's 14th birthday, he asked for Call of Duty. Instead, he opened a long wooden box and found a Colt M911. The Delacroix family name had been carved into the handle. Charlie smiled, thanked his parents, and carried the weapon upstairs. Then he threw it out of his bedroom window. Guns were bad. He had understood that much from an early age. The other children at school did not want to talk about weapons, torture, or the best knots for tying someone to a chair. They talked about video games, superhero movies, music, and homework. Charlie desperately wanted to join those conversations, but most students already avoided him because of his surname. He pretended not to hear their parents whispering about the Delacroix family. In 4th grade, Charlie finally made a real friend named Cole. Cole invited Charlie to his house for dinner. Charlie was so excited that he spent the entire school day imagining it. He wondered what normal families ate and whether they watched television together afterward. His excitement ended when he met Cole's mother outside the school. She recognized Charlie immediately. Her eyes widened, and her thin lips twisted with disgust. "No," she said. "No, sweetheart. I changed my mind." Charlie felt the words strike him in the chest. "That boy is not coming into our home." "But why?" Cole demanded. "You said he could." "I said no." Her voice was sharp enough to make Charlie jump. She refused even to look at him. Instead, she turned and marched toward their old Prius, a car Delilah had once pointed at, while laughing cruelly. "Get your backpack," Cole's mother ordered. "Now." "Okay, Mom." Cole gave Charlie an embarrassed smile. "I'll see you tomorrow?" His mother grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the car. "You certainly will not." Charlie could still hear her shouting after she had forced Cole inside. "Do not go near that evil little monster. Do you understand me?" "But, Mom..." "Do you understand?" Charlie pretended the words did not hurt. He swallowed the pain like a mouthful of razor blades, smiled, and waved. "Bye, Cole." The next morning, Charlie waited outside the school gate. He sat on a low wall with his legs swinging and Pokemon cards tucked into his pocket. He wanted to talk about the newest episode and hoped Cole's mother had calmed down. Charlie waited until the bell rang. Cole never came to the gate. When Charlie entered the classroom, he found Cole surrounded by other children. Cole was loudly telling them that Charlie's parents were psycho killers. When Cole saw him, his face tightened in an imitation of his mother's disgust. He stood, curling his hands into fists. "My mom said your parents kill people," Cole announced. Charlie did not deny it. It was true. Instead, he swallowed the sob building in his throat and walked toward Cole until they stood face to face. Charlie smiled like his father. Wide, cold, and poisonous. "Yeah," he said. Fear appeared in Cole's eyes, and Charlie felt a strange excitement. He stepped closer until their foreheads touched. "And you're fucking next." The classroom erupted into screams. For the first time, Charlie noticed an opportunity. He had spent years hiding at the edge of the classroom, ignored by everyone except the children, whispering about his family. Now they were finally looking at him. Charlie poked Cole between the eyes, copying the way his father questioned hostages. He pushed harder with every word. Cole stumbled backward and nearly tripped. "Talk about me again," Charlie warned. He raised his voice so the children hiding behind their desks could hear him. "I'll tell my parents to cut you into pieces and bake you into a pie." Charlie stepped on Cole's bright red shoes. "And if you tell a teacher," he dragged one finger across his throat, "you're dead meat." Cole began to cry. To Charlie's surprise, he nodded quickly. Okay, I won't tell anyone." His voice became a frightened squeak. "Do you want to borrow some games? I just got Final Fantasy. You can keep it if you want." Charlie looked around the classroom. Every child was trembling. Several wore large, false smiles and seemed desperate to please him. It was the same way adults looked at Noah Delacroix. Charlie realized that fear looked almost funny. His father often said fear was power. It was the reason the Delacroix family controlled a billion-dollar criminal organization. For the first time, Charlie understood what he meant. Naturally, he took advantage of his new position. By recess, other children had given him $7 and 3 juice boxes without being asked. Cole became his right-hand man and stayed close to him all day. Charlie even acquired a girlfriend named Jenny, who handed him a love letter in the cafeteria. He crushed the note, threw it back at her, and said, "Maybe." Charlie did not know how to behave around friends. The only children he had spent time with before Cole were the sons and daughters of people his father had kidnapped for ransom. 2 of them were named Adelaide and Roman. They were kept in the Delacroix basement for almost a year. When Charlie was younger, he would sneak downstairs and ask them to play with him. He once offered Roman his Game Boy. When Roman reached for it, Charlie saw an opportunity and hit him in the face with the console. After that, they became reluctant friends. They did not like Charlie, but he was their only source of entertainment. Sometimes Charlie carried his sleeping bag into the basement and slept near them. He brought stuffed animals and stole candy from the kitchen to share. Fortunately, his father did not kill Adelaide or Roman. They were bargaining tools, and eventually Charlie saw Noah dragging them upstairs during negotiations. Charlie never learned what happened to them afterward. His reputation followed him into high school. Everyone knew not to challenge Charlie Delacroix. Students moved out of his way in the hallways. He had his own group of followers who did almost anything he asked. He was invited to every party and treated like a king. Cole Whitaker remained at his side. Cole was his most loyal friend, his right hand, his closest companion. Then at a party, Charlie made out with him. Charlie was completely sober. He remembered the taste of cigarette smoke and stale vodka on Cole's lips. He remembered running his fingers through Cole's hair and discovering that he liked the feeling. There was no hesitation and no guilt. Cole kissed him again, harder this time, opening Charlie's mouth with his tongue. For a while, Charlie thought telling his parents the truth might finally make them understand him. Perhaps they would realize they had raised a very different kind of Delacroix heir. However, being king at school had already started to feel empty. Being feared and constantly praised became boring when it was guaranteed. Charlie earned perfect grades, but not because he was exceptionally intelligent. His teachers had been threatened. On the first day of high school, a severed cat's head arrived at the faculty office. After that, every teacher gave Charlie the highest possible score. His entire education was already planned. His future had been decided before he had any chance to choose it. During that final family dinner, Charlie tried again. "Dad," he said, making his voice louder. Noah ignored him. The last time Charlie interrupted dinner, he had announced that he liked boys. The conversation went exactly as badly as he expected. Within 2 weeks, Charlie became a stranger in his own home. He had once been celebrated as the future of the Delacroix family. Now he was forced to sit at the far end of the dining table and ordered to remain silent. His father began discussing the possibility of adopting another boy to replace him as heir. His mother wanted to send him to a summer camp in Texas that promised to correct what she called his unholy thoughts. Charlie was bored. He was bored of being an artificial king at school. He was bored of his family's hatred. He was bored of pretending he wanted the life his father had planned for him. That was why he did not continue warning his parents about the terrible feeling growing inside him. After his mother poured wine over him, Charlie lowered his head as instructed and continued eating mashed potatoes. Even when the front door burst open, he kept eating. Armed federal agents rushed into the house, shouting orders. They forced Noah and Delilah away from the table, pushed them to the floor, and placed them in handcuffs. Charlie continued eating until a woman gently took his arm and led him outside. He was placed in a police car and given a Nintendo DS and a cup of instant noodles. 3 hours later, Charlie sat alone in a windowless interview room playing Mario Kart. Eventually, a bearded man with narrow eyes entered. The man looked at Charlie as though he believed criminal behavior could be inherited through blood. He offered Charlie hot chocolate. Charlie ignored it and closed his game. "I want to go home." He gave the man his usual royal smile. "I have nothing to do with them." The man laughed. It was the first time Charlie understood that he was speaking to someone who did not fear him. This man would not bow, flatter him, or obey a ridiculous demand. At school, Charlie had once ordered an older student to wash his hair, and the boy had actually done it. The police officer leaned back. "Well, you grew up in that house. You know where your father keeps his secrets. For now, you'll be working with us." Charlie copied the man's posture. "I want a lawyer. I'm not saying anything until I have one." The officer sighed dramatically and tilted his head toward the ceiling. "You're 16, kid. You don't want to take the lawyer route." "Why?" Charlie knew enough to understand that a lawyer was probably his best chance of surviving the situation. The officer breathed out sharply as though Charlie were deliberately causing trouble. "We don't suspect you of anything," he said. "This is about your parents. We need to know everything you learned in that house, including what your father keeps in his safe." The man leaned forward. Your father has information about politicians and other important people. He has blood on his hands, and he controls powerful individuals. He raised an eyebrow. So, are you going to sing like a canary, or are you going to test my patience? Charlie shrugged. I'll sing. What do I get? The officer rolled his eyes. A Delacroix through and through. What do you want? Food. I'm starving, and I want Taco Bell. I can arrange that. Charlie realized that fear was not the only way to get what he wanted. I want a large burrito with extra sour cream and no guacamole. I also want a Diet Coke, please. The officer's smile tightened. Anything else, Your Highness? Charlie held up his dying Nintendo DS. A charger? The officer gave him a sarcastic two-finger salute and left, slamming the door. Charlie returned to Mario Kart. The console died 20 minutes later. He curled up on the floor, folded his jacket beneath his head, and went to sleep. He woke to the smell of fried beef and melted cheese. A warm Taco Bell bag had been placed in front of him, followed by a cup of soda. They only had regular Coke, the officer said as Charlie sat up and rubbed his eyes. All right, kid. Time to move. Charlie took a bite from the soggy burrito. Where are we going? First, we need to take you to your social worker. Charlie nearly choked. No social workers. He jumped to his feet. I'm not doing that. You're a minor, Charlie. The officer's voice became slow and condescending. In 2 long steps, he stood inches away. The sharp smell of hair gel and polished shoes filled Charlie's nose. You have 2 choices. The officer raised one finger. You meet your social worker and enter the legal adoption system. He raised another. Or you spend 2 years in juvenile detention for your involvement with a criminal family. The man's expression remained completely serious. Remember that I spent 3 hours fighting to get you the kinder option. I didn't ask you to. I didn't need your permission. I did it anyway. Charlie understood when he had pushed far enough. He swallowed the bitter taste of burrito and nodded. Fine. The officer helped him collect his few belongings and allowed him to finish eating. Then he led Charlie out of the interview room and into the cool evening air. My colleague found you a place in a children's home in the next town, he explained. A woman with a cloud of bright red curls waited in the driver's seat of a Range Rover. She wore plaid clothing and looked as though she had been designed to appear cheerful. Jump in, she called, patting the passenger seat. It's lovely to meet you, honeybee. I'm your social worker, but you can call me Elizabeth. Charlie hesitated. The police officer pushed him forward and climbed into the back seat beside him. Relax, the man said. There's no reason to be frightened. Elizabeth is helping you. He slammed the door. The clean smell of the new car was strangely comforting. Charlie sank into the warm seat and allowed his body to relax for what felt like the first time in his life. The place is called Riverside, the officer said without looking away from his phone. It has a large swimming pool and you'll get your own room. He certainly will, Elizabeth added brightly. Riverside is the best. Charlie nearly choked on his lukewarm soda. Don't worry, Charlie. You're going to love it. I know children's homes have a bad reputation, but Riverside has many children your age. You'll make so many friends. Her smile was slightly too wide. Elizabeth started the engine and turned to look at Charlie. What other games would you like? That looks like an old console. I might be able to arrange a Nintendo Switch. That's what children like now, isn't it? Charlie had to respect her method. Using video games to manipulate a minor was slightly unhinged, but it was clever. He covered a burp and rested his face against the window. The sun was sinking below the horizon, coloring the sky orange and pink. His eyes became heavy. "There are several games I want," Charlie said. "Zelda? Animal Crossing? Mario?" He yawned. "Sleepy, honeybee?" Elizabeth hummed. Her voice began to sound like distant ocean waves, slow waves rolling gently onto a beach. Charlie had not realized how tired he was until his chin began falling against his chest. A deep exhaustion spread through his body. He had not felt this sleepy since his father's men put sedatives into his chocolate milkshake during his 13th birthday party. A thin line of drool ran down his chin. Charlie jerked awake. The drive had become a long, painful blur. He looked outside. Blue sky, he thought. Then he laughed, although nothing was funny. His head struck the window with a soft thud. Blue filled his vision. Bright blue. Crystal blue. Too much blue. His eyelids became heavier. Bile rose in his throat, and the world began spinning. The road twisted into impossible shapes. The sky seemed to melt into the dark pavement. Passing headlights stretched into pale, faceless figures. Charlie understood what was happening. He had been drugged. "It's all right, Charlie," Elizabeth said. "Go to sleep." His arms and legs softened. An uncomfortable warmth spread beneath his skin. Charlie blinked hard and reached for the door handle. He needed to get out. His thoughts had become soft, broken, and difficult to hold. Cole. The name escaped him in a weak rush. Charlie could not move properly. His bones felt as heavy as lead. Cole had always been beside him, ready to help. Now Charlie was alone in a car moving too quickly down an empty highway. His lips felt swollen and numb. His thoughts were even more numb. This was not an ordinary sedative. Charlie had experienced enough drugs through his father's carelessness to know the difference. This substance felt dirtier. Even Noah had never done this to him. "What is this?" Charlie asked. His words came out thick and slurred. "The passwords, honeybee," Elizabeth replied calmly. "What?" Charlie blinked through the feathery light covering his vision. "Your father's passwords," she repeated. "Honestly, I expected better from you. As the son of a major criminal, surely you know about sodium thiopental." She gave a small sigh and then laughed. "It's a short-acting barbiturate. People like to call it truth serum." Black spots danced at the edges of Charlie's sight. "The passwords, Charlie. We need access to your father's accounts, emails, offshore bank accounts, and the large safe inside his safe house in Odintsovo, Moscow Oblast." Elizabeth's laughter crashed through his mind. "Let's begin with the passwords." "I don't know." Charlie struck the window with his fists. Then his body fell uselessly against the seat. I don't know." Words tangled on his tongue. "I don't know." Through his half-closed eyes, Elizabeth's red hair became a bright explosion of color. "Not even a Gmail password?" she asked. "That's unfortunate." The car suddenly stopped. Charlie heard a door open. Cold air touched his cheek. "All right, honeybee," Elizabeth said. "As long as you're telling the truth." Her heels clicked against the road. The door slammed. Charlie tried to move. His seatbelt would not release. His brain felt like thick syrup. Sleep, he told himself. He only needed to sleep. He could find a way out later. Yes, that was what he would do. His eyes closed. A strange giggle escaped him, and his head fell against the window. That was his plan. The smell of smoke pulled Charlie from the darkness. He blinked and threw himself forward, breathing in short, painful gasps. Orange flames moved across the seats in front of him. Fire. "Help!" His cry turned into a cough. Smoke rose into his face and burned his eyes. "No." He pulled desperately at the seatbelt. It was stuck. Charlie reached blindly around the seat and found only empty Taco Bell packaging and his Nintendo DS. "My birthday," he said. Smoke filled his mouth, making him cough and choke. Tears ran down his face. He struck his head against the window. "It's my birthday," he repeated more loudly. "My birthday and my birth time." "Your birth time?" Elizabeth called from outside the vehicle. "What time were you born, Charlie?" 18 minutes past 6. Charlie coughed and vomited over himself. He forced his shaking hands to work and finally tore himself free from the seatbelt. It was too late to stop the fire. Flames spread through the car and consumed the empty food cartons. Charlie fell back against the seat, coughing. His chest felt as though it were being crushed, and the smoke swallowed every attempt to scream. His first instinct was to climb into the trunk. A deep roar behind him sent him onto his knees. He covered his head with both arms. The trunk erupted in brilliant shades of orange. Despite everything, part of Charlie almost admired the color. "Your birthday and birth time," Elizabeth repeated. Her voice was becoming harder to hear through the smoke. "Yes," Charlie croaked. "Yes." His head struck the window. "Yes." He hit it again. "Let me out," he whispered. Then he began screaming. "Let me out! Let me fucking out!" A sob escaped him. It sounded small, young, and painfully honest. "Please," Charlie begged. "Please." "One final question," Elizabeth said. Her cheerful voice had disappeared. Now she sounded cold and cruel. "Is it becoming warm in there, Charlie?" "Fuck you," he gasped. "Fuck you." Riverside Children's Home is not a normal adoption home, Elizabeth explained. It is a recruitment program. Smoke darkened Charlie's vision. "We have some of your father's passwords, but we need much more. We need informants, financial records, account details, and everything required to destroy your father's organization from the roots." Blackness spread around Charlie. Soon he could no longer see his hands. Everything was dark and wrong. He wiped soot from his eyes and crawled toward the left door. Bursts of light exploded behind his eyes like colliding stars. "I'm going to die," he thought. For some reason, the realization brought a strange feeling of acceptance. I'm going to fucking die. "Escape from the car, honeybee," Elizabeth called. "If you succeed, consider yourself cleared of suspicion." Something inside Charlie broke free. Perhaps it was his remaining humanity. Perhaps it was the true Delacroix nature his father always claimed lived inside him. Suddenly, Charlie's mind became clear. Sharp understanding cut through the drugs and smoke. He removed his sweatshirt and wrapped it around his hands. Then he threw himself toward the seat where the police officer had been sitting. As Charlie expected, the officer had left a knife behind. Charlie grabbed it and drove the blade into the inside of the door. Nothing happened. He clenched his teeth and tried again. How many times had his father taught him how to escape from a vehicle? A wild scream tore from Charlie's throat. How many times had he sat in the back of the family car, while one of his cousins proudly claimed to know more about escaping a police car than he did? Charlie struck the door again. Metal screamed. He pushed his entire body against it. Again, a click came from the lock. One moment, Charlie was choking inside the burning car. The next, he fell through the open door. Fresh air flooded his lungs as he struck the pavement. Move! The thought cut through everything else. The burning car was going to explode. Charlie dragged himself backward on his elbows. The explosion lifted him from the ground and threw him face first into wet grass. He did not remain there. Charlie forced himself upright. Something warm ran down his face. He bent and wrapped his fingers around the knife that had fallen beside him. Elizabeth stood nearby with her arms folded and a pleased smile on her lips. The police officer waited several feet away, also watching him. Charlie did not hesitate. He stared at the knife in his hand and remembered the officer's promises. A safe place, a children's home, freedom from his parents, a new beginning. Every word had been a lie. Charlie almost laughed. He crossed the distance between them and drove the knife directly into the officer's chest. His father had taught him where to strike. Straight through the heart, quick, efficient. The officer's eyes widened. His lips parted as if he wanted to shout. His thick fingers twitched around the handle, trying to pull the knife free. Then his body collapsed. Charlie stepped backward. His knees failed and he fell with the dead man. The world seemed to shake violently before becoming still. Above Charlie, the sky was completely dark. A narrow piece of the full moon appeared from behind the clouds. I was supposed to die, he thought. Why didn't I? Charlie reached toward the moon as though he might touch it. His father believed in a higher force that controlled fate. Noah claimed that sometimes death refused to take a person because a greater future was waiting for them. Am I dead? The thought slowly came apart inside Charlie's mind. Am I already a corpse? Did I really escape the car? Oh, honeybee, Elizabeth said. She knelt beside him and carefully pulled the knife from his hand. Charlie watched the moon disappear behind the clouds. You're going to fit in perfectly. Charlie did not remember the rest of the journey to Riverside Children's Home. His next clear memory was sitting in a comfortable chair across from Elizabeth. She worked behind an open MacBook while Charlie happily gave her every piece of information he knew about his father. Whatever drug remained in his body felt wonderful. Everything seemed funny. Charlie sang like a canary, answering each question with his head tilted back and a laugh on his lips. The ceiling looked enormous. He counted every pattern above him, every crack in the floor, and every drop of blood sliding down his forehead. At some point, he fell out of the chair and began laughing uncontrollably. What is the name of your father's informant? Elizabeth asked. Charlie rolled onto his back. Poop, he answered. The word sent him into another fit of laughter. He did not remember being dragged from the room. He also did not remember being taken into a small bedroom with 2 beds and a low ceiling. When Charlie finally woke, he was staring at a ceiling he did not recognize. He sat up too quickly and struck his head. Pain exploded through his skull. He immediately grabbed his throat. It tasted of blood, and a dull ache spread through his head. His wrists burned with marks that felt as though ropes had recently been tied around them. Charlie studied the room through unfocused eyes. Vomit-colored curtains covered windows fitted with prison-like bars. His half of the bedroom was almost empty. There was a bare bed frame, pale pink blankets, and one thin, uncomfortable pillow. The other side of the room was filled with life. A24 movie posters covered the wall. A desk overflowed with Lego pieces. A television and PlayStation 4 had been mounted nearby. Charlie frowned at a small Lego figure of Monkey D. Luffy standing on top of a model of the Going Merry. Don't judge me, a voice said. Charlie jumped. I'm not, he croaked. He coughed, wincing at the pain in his throat. I love One Piece. A figure moved above him, appearing first as a blur. You're about 2 sizes smaller than me, said a boy with messy blonde hair. He swung down from the top bunk. So you can wear Zorro. Charlie's mind was still too foggy to understand. Then he looked down. He was wearing an old pajama shirt with the green-haired swordsman printed across the front. The other boy gave him an awkward smile. "They brought you in while you were completely out of it," he explained. "They told me to change your clothes." "Oh." Charlie found himself smiling. Perhaps he was still high. "Well, I do like Zorro." The boy jumped from the bunk and straightened. In the weak light coming through the window, he looked like an older version of Percy Jackson. He had soft, almost angelic curls and skin that seemed unnaturally pale. "I'm Jude," he said. "Don't touch my things and we'll be fine." Despite his words, Jude's eyes looked unexpectedly kind. "What about you?" Charlie noticed his accent immediately. "You're British?" It was the first thing that entered his mind, and he regretted saying it as soon as the words left his mouth. "Sort of." Jude picked up a small Lego Nami and placed her beside Luffy. "You told me your name last night, but you were extremely high. No offense, but I'm not calling you Mr. Cheese." "Kaz," Charlie replied quickly. "Call me Kaz." "Kaz." Jude seemed unable to keep his hands still. He picked up different Lego figures, separated their pieces, and put them together again. He raised Nami into the air and imitated her voice. "Hello, Kaz?" Charlie wondered whether Jude was making fun of him. The smell of smoke no longer poured from Charlie's skin. Instead, he noticed a sweet hint of coconut shampoo mixed with a strong clinical soap. He could not remember taking a shower. He remembered only flashes of freezing water and rough hands, scrubbing his body until his skin felt raw. His throat still hurt, and the words came out unevenly. "Were you brought here against your will, too?" "What?" Jude's mouth curved slightly. Charlie noticed that he had not blinked for an uncomfortably long time. "Dude." Jude knelt in front of him and flicked him between the eyes. Charlie saw that his eyes were a deep brown, like melted chocolate. Something twisted strangely in Charlie's stomach. He shook his head and tried to clear the remaining dizziness. He was still affected by the drugs. That had to be the reason. Jude poked him between the eyes again, harder this time. "Did someone hit you on the head last night? Riverside isn't a prison." Charlie slowly turned toward the metal bars covering the windows. "Of course it wasn't." He pushed Jude's hand away and leaned back. Perhaps telling this boy the truth had been a mistake. Charlie pulled his familiar smile across his face. It was the same smooth, confident smile he had learned from his father and used throughout his entire life. Then he jumped out of bed. "How about you give me a tour of the house?" Story 3. I had never thought of my son as the artistic type. Jacob had recently turned 8, and for most of his life he had been the kind of child who wanted nothing to do with sitting still. He loved being outside. He spent his afternoons catching beetles under rocks, chasing grasshoppers through the yard, climbing trees higher than his mother wanted him to, and racing his bicycle up and down the street with the other kids in the neighborhood. Every evening, one of us had to call him inside before it got dark. Even then, he never came willingly. "Just 5 more minutes," he would shout from the sidewalk. 5 minutes would turn into 10. 10 would turn into 20. Sometimes I had to walk outside, take him by the shoulder, and guide him into the house while he complained that all the other kids were allowed to stay out longer. That was the Jacob I knew. Then, about a year ago, something changed. I still do not know what caused it. There was no accident, no frightening event, and no clear reason for the sudden change in his behavior. It was as if someone had flipped a switch inside him overnight. One day, I came home from work and found him sitting at the kitchen table with his face bent over a brand new sketchbook. He was completely focused on the page. His hand moved quickly as he scribbled with a dark crayon. He hummed quietly to himself, repeating the same little tune over and over while he worked. My wife stood near the stove, preparing dinner. The smell of pork chops filled the kitchen, mixed with green beans, mashed potatoes, and butter. It was one of those warm, comforting smells that usually made me feel relaxed the moment I walked through the door. I placed my keys on the counter and looked over Jacob's shoulder. "What have you got there, buddy?" He did not answer. His nose was almost touching the page. He seemed so deeply focused that he either did not hear me or chose not to respond. My wife laughed softly. "That's your son's new favorite thing," she said. "He begged me to take him to the store and buy him that sketchbook." I looked at Jacob again. "Oh, really? We have an artist in the family now?" I placed my hands on his shoulders and shook him lightly. He leaned with the movement but never stopped drawing. I patted him on the back, then walked over to my wife. I wrapped an arm around her waist and kissed her cheek. She smiled without looking away from the food. I pulled out the chair beside Jacob and sat down. "So how was your day, boyo? Did you and Mom have fun?" He kept his eyes on the sketchbook. "Today was so fun," he said excitedly. "We went to the park, and we went to the movies, and Mom got me this book. Oh, and she got me crayons, too." He lifted one of the crayons as if I might not believe him. I smiled and looked toward my wife. "What about you, honey? How was your day?" "Any day I don't have to go to work is a good day," she replied. "The park was really nice. We went to one we hadn't visited before." She turned away from the stove and looked at me. "What about you? They didn't work you too hard today, did they?" I leaned back in the chair and sighed. "I'll just say I'm happy to be home." Her expression softened. "It's good to have you home." Then she gave me a playful smile. "I'll tell you what. After dinner, if you behave, maybe we can have our own little play date." I raised my eyebrows. "Is that so?" "Only if you do the dishes," she added. "I cooked, so it's only fair." I smirked and pressed my tongue against the inside of my cheek. I was going to do the dishes anyway. What kind of husband do you think I am? The kind who sometimes leaves one pan soaking for 3 days. That happened once. It happened last week. I stood and pointed toward the table. "You know what? Sit down. I'll finish cooking." She laughed and took my seat. I stood over the stove, checking the pork chops and stirring the green beans. Behind me, Jacob continued humming. The sound was quiet, but it seemed to fill every silent moment in the room. He barely spoke during dinner preparations. When everything was ready, I called his name. He did not respond. I called again, louder this time. Nothing. Finally, I had to raise my voice enough to make my wife jump. "Jacob!" He stopped drawing. Then he stood up calmly, as if I had not been calling him for the past minute. He picked up the sketchbook and walked toward me. "I drew this for you." He held the book in front of my face. The picture showed our house. It was drawn with simple lines and bright colors. There was a green lawn, a yellow sun, and a figure standing in the driveway. My heart warmed. "Is that me?" I asked. "That's really sweet, Jakey. Thank you." I reached for the sketchbook, planning to remove the page and place it on the refrigerator. Jacob quickly pulled it away. He looked at me with confusion. "You really don't know who that is?" I paused. "It's me, right?" Jacob rolled his eyes. "No." He sounded personally offended. "That's Mr. Thomas, silly. Can't you tell?" He pointed to the figure's chest. "See? He's wearing the star." Mr. Thomas lived next door. He was a police officer and had been one for many years. Jacob sometimes saw him leaving for work in the morning. dressed in his uniform with his badge shining on his chest. I guessed the uniform had made an impression on him. Still, I did not understand why Jacob had drawn a picture of our neighbor and said it was for me. "Right," I said slowly. "Of course. Mr. Thomas." I forced a smile. "That's really good, buddy. Keep practicing. You're already so talented that you might become famous someday." Jacob seemed satisfied with that answer. He closed the sketchbook and placed it beside his plate. After dinner, I cleaned the kitchen from the top to bottom. Part of it was because I had promised my wife, but most of it was because I still wanted the private time she had offered me earlier. Jacob spent the rest of the evening in his bedroom. Every time I walked past his door, I saw him sitting on the floor or at his desk, drawing in the sketchbook. He continued humming that same quiet tune. The following morning, my wife and I both had work. I woke up before her so I could take Jacob to the summer daycare program he attended while school was closed. Getting him out of bed was difficult. He was half asleep as I dressed him and led him downstairs. Carrying him to the car felt like carrying a body with no bones. His arms hung loose, his head rested against my shoulder, and his eyes barely open. However, even while half asleep, he refused to release the sketchbook. He held it tightly against his chest. I tried to place it in his backpack, but he pulled it away and mumbled, "No." So I let him keep it. At the daycare center, a staff member met us near the entrance. Jacob slowly walked inside, dragging his feet and rubbing one eye. He turned and gave me a sleepy wave before disappearing through the doors. I drove to work and tried not to think about the drawing of Mr. Thomas. The day continued normally until around 3 in the afternoon. My phone began ringing. It was my wife. I answered with my usual greeting. "Hey, beautiful. What's going on?" Her voice immediately told me that something was wrong. "I think something is happening at the neighbor's house," she said. "There are 3 police cars outside." I sat straighter in my chair. "What do you mean? Who told you?" "Becky called me. She thought the police were at our house at first." Becky was one of my wife's friends from the neighborhood. She lived a few houses down and seemed to know everything that happened on our street. "Did she say what happened?" "No. She called because the police knocked on our door. I think they wanted to know if we had seen anything." "Did she answer the door for us?" "No, they didn't go inside. Apparently, they waited for a while, then went back to the neighbor's house. I think they're still there." I frowned. "Which neighbor are we talking about?" "I think it's the police officer, Mr. Thompson." "Mr. Thomas?" "Yes, that's him." For a moment, I saw Jacob's drawing in my mind. Our house, the driveway. Mr. Thomas standing outside with a star on his chest. I checked the time. "All right, I'll see if I can leave early. I'll pick up Jacob and drive home. Maybe the police will still be there, and I can find out what happened." "Okay, be careful." "I will." We exchanged a few kisses through the phone, said we loved each other, and ended the call. I approached my supervisor and explained the situation. He looked unsure at first, but I had a good reputation at work. I rarely missed a shift and almost never asked to leave early. After a moment, he agreed. I drove to the daycare center. When the staff member brought Jacob to the front office, his face was buried in the sketchbook again. This time, he appeared to be drawing SpongeBob and Patrick. At least, that was what I thought they were. One figure was a yellow square, while the other was pink and shaped like a star. "He's been drawing all day," the staff member said while signing him out. "It looks like you have a little artist." "Yeah," I replied with a smile. "That's what everyone keeps telling me." The sentence sounded strange after I said it. No one besides my wife had said that to me. I did not know why I had answered that way. It simply felt like the correct thing to say at the time. The drive home was quiet. Jacob kept drawing, even when the car moved over rough parts of the road. He did not ask why I had picked him up early. My thoughts remained on Mr. Thomas. We were not best friends, but we knew each other well enough. We had shared drinks several times. I had helped him build part of his fence and move heavy furniture into his house. He had once watched Jacob for 20 minutes when my wife and I were stuck in traffic. He was a good neighbor. I wanted him to be safe. Those hopes disappeared when I turned onto our street. The number of police vehicles had doubled. At least 6 patrol cars stood in front of Mr. Thomas's house. Yellow police tape stretched across his driveway and part of the lawn. Officers moved in and out of the house, speaking quietly to one another. I parked in front of our home. Jacob immediately pressed his face against the window. His tiredness vanished. The flashing lights reflected in his wide eyes. "What's wrong, Daddy?" "I don't know yet." "Why are there so many police?" "They're probably checking something." Did something happen to Mr. Thomas? I opened the car door and lifted Jacob into my arms. He kept looking over my shoulder as I hurried toward the house. "I don't know, buddy. Go inside and play while I find out what's happening, okay? Daddy will be right back." I unlocked the door and placed him inside. He still held the sketchbook. "Stay in the house," I told him. He nodded. I shut the door and turned toward the police. Before I could approach them, one of the officers walked toward me. "Sir, do you live here?" "Yes. This is my house. Mr. Thomas is my neighbor." The officer looked tired and angry. "He's also a colleague and friend of mine," he said. "Have you seen anything suspicious in the last 24 hours? Did you hear anything last night?" I scratched the side of my neck and tried to remember. "No, nothing unusual. What happened? Is everything all right?" The officer did not answer. "Mr. Thomas is a police officer," I continued. "Did he do something illegal?" The man stared at me through black sunglasses. "No." He paused. "He's gone? That is all the information we can provide right now." "Gone?" My stomach tightened. "What do you mean by gone? Is he dead? Did someone hurt him?" The officer pressed his lips together. Behind him, a person wearing gloves and a white protective suit carried something out of the house. I assumed the person was part of a forensic team. "We don't know what happened," the officer said. "We're hoping for the best. If you remember anything or see Mr. Thomas, call us immediately." "Did someone break into his house?" "I can't discuss the investigation." "Was there blood?" "Sir, I need you to go inside." He sounded firm now. "Stay away from the scene, and I keep your family indoors." I wanted to ask more questions, but I knew he would not answer them. I returned home and called my wife. I told her that Mr. Thomas had disappeared and that even the police seemed confused. There was nothing else we could do. I followed the officer's instructions and stayed inside with Jacob. I started cooking dinner while waiting for my wife to come home. By the time she arrived, only 2 police vehicles remained outside Mr. Thomas's house. The sun was beginning to set. Long shadows stretched across the street, and the flashing lights made the windows of his empty house glow red and blue. My wife and I tried to behave normally, but the house felt tense. During dinner, Jacob continued drawing. He had not asked to go outside once since we returned home. That alone felt strange. Normally, the sight of police cars would have made him desperate to run into the yard and watch. Instead, he sat at the table with his sketchbook. He appeared to be drawing a woman. His food remained untouched. "Jacob," I said, Put the book down and eat." He groaned but closed the sketchbook. He picked up his fork and moved a few peas around his plate. My wife and I talked quietly about work. We avoided discussing Mr. Thomas in front of him. Then, between two bites of chicken, Jacob spoke. "Daddy." His voice was softer than usual. "Yes?" "Are the police still outside?" My wife stopped moving. I looked at her, and she looked back at me. "I think there are still a few," I said carefully. "But don't worry. They're looking for Mr. Thomas. They want to make sure he's okay." Jacob stared at his plate. "It's just, yeah," he paused. "I think they're looking in the wrong place." The water in my mouth went down the wrong way. I coughed hard, nearly choking. My wife reached toward me, but I waved her off. When I could breathe again, I looked at Jacob. "What do you mean they're looking in the wrong place?" He shrugged. "Where should they be looking, sport?" "I don't know." He pushed a pea across his plate. "Not there. I don't think he's home." My wife quickly interrupted. "Let's not talk about this anymore." She pointed toward his dinner. "Finish eating, then take a shower. You have to wake up early tomorrow." Jacob frowned. "But I'm not tired." "You will be tired in the morning." "I wanted to finish drawing this picture of you." He opened the sketchbook and showed her the page. A simple outline of a woman stood in the center. "See?" My wife smiled. "All right. You can finish the picture, but then it's bath time." "Fine," Jacob groaned. He jumped down from his chair and hurried to his bedroom with the book in his hands. My wife and I cleaned the kitchen together. As soon as Jacob was out of hearing distance, we began discussing Mr. Thomas. At first, we tried to be logical. Maybe he had left on his own. Maybe he was dealing with a personal problem. Maybe something had happened during police work that made him run. Then the theories became darker. What if he was kidnapped? My wife asked. What if someone killed him and moved the body? What if the police know more than they are saying? What if he found out something he wasn't supposed to know? Within 45 minutes, we sounded like conspiracy theorists. Every possibility seemed both ridiculous and believable. Eventually, Jacob ran into the kitchen. "Look, Mommy, I'm finished." My wife took the sketchbook. "Oh, my goodness. Look at that." She turned the page toward me. "Doesn't it look just like me?" The drawing was much more detailed than the earlier one. Jacob had drawn her wearing her work uniform. Her hair was tied into the messy bun she wore most mornings. Around her neck was the gold necklace I had given her for Christmas the previous year. It was not perfect, of course. He was still only 8. But the details were surprisingly accurate. "Wow, Jake," I said. "You should draw Daddy next." Jacob laughed. "It's not time to draw you yet, silly." The words made me pause. "What does that mean?" He only giggled. I forced a smile. "Well, guess what?" Jacob looked up at me. "Daddy controls bath time." I checked my watch in an exaggerated way. "And it looks like you are 20 minutes late." Jacob squealed and ran. I chased him down the hallway, pretending I was going to catch him. He laughed as he rushed into his room and gathered his pajamas and towel. For a little while, everything felt normal again. After his shower, I tucked him into bed and kissed his forehead. The sketchbook rested beside him. "Good night, buddy." "Good night, Daddy." My wife and I stayed awake for another hour. We talked about the future, work, money, and a vacation we hoped to take before summer ended. We avoided discussing Mr. Thomas again. Eventually, we fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, the space beside me was empty. I assumed my wife had gotten up early and decided to take Jacob to daycare. That happened occasionally. She knew I hated mornings, so sometimes she let me sleep while she handled everything. I went through my normal routine. I showered, I brushed my teeth, I got dressed for work. I walked downstairs, grabbed my keys, and headed toward the front door. That was when I noticed her car through the window. It was still in the driveway. I stopped. Maybe she had taken my car. I looked through the window again. My car was there too. Both vehicles sat exactly where we had left them. A feeling of confusion slowly turned into concern. I walked upstairs. Jacob? There was no answer. I opened his bedroom door. He was still asleep. He lay curled beneath his blanket, breathing softly. The sketchbook was tucked tightly under his arm. I quietly closed the door and checked the bathroom. Empty. I walked through the upstairs hallway. Honey? No response. Sweetheart, are you here? Silence. I checked the guest room, the laundry room, and the downstairs bathroom. She was nowhere in the house. I called her phone. A moment later, I heard it ringing upstairs. I followed the sound into our bedroom. Her phone was still connected to the charger on the nightstand. That was when fear took control of me. My wife never left home without her phone. She did not even walk to the mailbox without taking it. I checked the closet. Her shoes were still there. Her purse rested on the chair beside the dresser. Her keys were inside it. I called her name again, louder this time. Nothing answered. My thoughts moved quickly. Had she gone outside? Had someone entered the house? Had she heard something during the night and gone to investigate? Then I remembered Jacob's drawing. The thought came and went so quickly that I almost ignored it. A drawing of Mr. Thomas. Then he disappeared. A drawing of my wife. Now she was gone. It could not be a coincidence. I ran into Jacob's room. He was still asleep. I pulled the sketchbook from beneath his arm. He stirred immediately. "Daddy," he groaned. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the book. My hands shook as I turned the pages. There were drawings of cartoon characters. Trees, houses, animals, cars, and strange block-shaped people. I turned faster. "Daddy, what are you doing?" Jacob rubbed his eyes and sat up. I ignored him. Then I reached the drawing from the night before. My wife's picture. The page had changed. At first, I thought I had opened the wrong drawing. She was no longer wearing her work uniform. Her gold necklace was gone. Her clothes looked dirty and torn. Her hair was wet and tangled. Leaves and small branches were caught in her messy bun. Her eyes had been colored solid red. They did not look demonic. They looked bloodshot, as if she had been crying for hours or had not slept in days. The background was also different. Behind her were dark trees. Tall black lines surrounded her, forming what appeared to be a thick forest. The sky above was colored gray, and shadows filled the ground around her feet. My stomach twisted. Then I noticed the figure beside her. A man stood next to my wife. They were holding hands. For one brief second, I tried to convince myself it was me. Maybe Jacob had turned the drawing into a family portrait. Maybe he had added me after I asked him to draw Daddy next. But the man did not look like me. A bright star was drawn on his chest. "Mr. Thomas?" My wife and our missing neighbor stood together in a dark forest. They looked dirty, exhausted, and lost. I felt sick. The room seemed to tilt. I turned toward Jacob. He was watching me with a confused expression. "What's wrong, Daddy?" he asked. I held up the sketchbook. "Where is your mother?" Jacob looked at the drawing. He did not appear frightened. He studied the page for a moment as if he was trying to understand why I was upset. "They're okay," he said calmly. I could barely breathe. "What do you mean they're okay?" He reached for the sketchbook, but I pulled it away. Where are they, Jacob? His face tightened. I don't know. You said the police were looking in the wrong place. He blinked at me. Where should they look? I told you. I don't know. Then how do you know they're okay? Jacob looked toward the picture again. His expression softened. Because I can still draw them. A cold feeling moved through my entire body. I looked down at the page. My wife's red eyes seemed fixed on me. Mr. Thomas stood beside her, holding her hand. The trees behind them were thick and dark. I moved closer to the window, hoping the morning light would help me see some detail I'd missed. There were marks between the trees. At first, I thought they were shadows. Then I realized they were people. Dozens of thin, dark figures stood deep in the forest. Some were partly hidden behind tree trunks. Others crouched low to the ground. Their bodies had no clear faces, but every head was turned toward my wife and Mr. Thomas. I looked back at Jacob. Who are those people? He crawled closer and studied the page. I don't know. Did you draw them? I guess. What do you mean, you guess? He shrugged. Sometimes I draw things, and sometimes the pictures finish themselves. I stared at him. He said it casually, as though he were telling me about a television show he liked. What do you mean the pictures finish themselves? I draw the person first. He pointed toward my wife. Then, after they go away, the picture changes. My throat tightened. After they go away, he nodded, like Mr. Thomas. I grabbed his shoulders. Listen to me. Where did your mother go? I don't know. His voice became frightened. You have to know something. You drew her. You drew Mr. Thomas. Now they're both missing. I didn't make them go away. Tears filled his eyes. I just draw them when it's time. When it's time for what? I don't know. He began crying. I released his shoulders and stood. My mind was racing. I needed to call the police. I needed to show them the drawing. I needed to search the woods around our neighborhood, though I did not even know which forest Jacob had drawn. Then I remembered the park. My wife had mentioned taking Jacob to a new park, a park we had never visited before. I turned toward him. The park. He wiped his eyes. What? The park you went to with Mom, the new one. He became quiet. What was it called? I don't remember. Think, Jacob. I don't know. Was there a forest? He looked down. That was enough. I grabbed my phone and called my wife's friend, Becky. She answered after 2 rings. Hello? It's me. Did my wife tell you where she took Jacob the other day? What? The park. She said she visited a new park with him. I don't know. Why? She's missing. There was silence. What do you mean missing? She's not here. Her phone, purse, car, and keys are all still in the house. Oh, my God. Do you know which park they visited? No. I'm sorry. She just said they had a good day. I ended the call and contacted the police. While I waited, I kept staring at the drawing. Something new had appeared near the bottom of the page, a small shape beside one of the trees. I brought the sketchbook closer. It was a child. The figure was not fully drawn. There was only a round head, a small body, and one unfinished arm. My heart began pounding. I looked at Jacob. He had stopped crying. He stared at the page with wide eyes. What is that? I asked. I don't know. Is that you? He slowly shook his head. No. Then who is it? Jacob looked more frightened now. I don't know yet. The sound of police sirens approached in the distance. I felt a small amount of relief. Then Jacob reached for the sketchbook again. Daddy. What? His voice became a whisper. You shouldn't have looked. I stared at him. What does that mean? He pointed toward the unfinished child near the tree. That wasn't there before. I know. No, he said, shaking his head. I mean, it wasn't there until you opened the book. The sirens grew louder. I looked back at the page. The unfinished child had changed again. Its second arm was now visible. One hand held something long and dark, a crayon. The child's head was turned toward us. A thin smile had been drawn across its face. Then I noticed another new figure beside it. A taller person was slowly appearing between the trees. The outline was faint, but I could already see enough to recognize the clothes. Work shoes, dark trousers, the jacket I had put on that morning. My own face had not yet been drawn, but on the figure's chest, Jacob had written one word: Daddy. I dropped the sketchbook onto the floor. Jacob looked down at it. Then he looked at me with tears still shining in his eyes. I told you, he whispered. It wasn't time to draw you yet. Story 4. Every time Maxim returned to Kramatorsk, the city looked worse than before. He had stopped expecting anything else. Each visit revealed another street he no longer recognized, another apartment building split open by explosives, another familiar landmark reduced to a pile of concrete and twisted steel. Still, the damage always managed to surprise him. It was as if the city could not simply die. It had to be wounded again and again, each new attack cutting deeper into what remained. This time, several large apartment blocks had been completely destroyed by glide bombs. Where hundreds of people had once lived, there were now enormous hills of broken concrete. Whole floors had collapsed onto one another. Bathrooms, kitchens, and bedrooms were exposed to the cold air. Pieces of wallpaper still clung to some walls. A child's bright blue curtain moved slowly in a window that no longer had a room behind it. Other buildings were still standing, but they carried the scars of recent drone attacks. Their roofs were burned black. Windows had been blown out. Holes had been punched through walls that looked too damaged to survive another winter. The streets were almost empty. A few civilians still remained in the city, though Maxim rarely saw them outside. Most stayed underground or inside the strongest rooms they could find. The only people moving openly were soldiers, emergency workers, and the occasional old resident who refused to leave the home where they had spent their entire life. Closer to the city's center, workers had begun stretching anti-drone netting over roads and between buildings. The work was not finished. Long sheets of nylon cord hung above intersections and twisted around broken streetlights. Some sections sagged so low that vehicles had to move carefully beneath them. The netting made entire neighborhoods look as if they had been claimed by some enormous spider. Maxim watched it pass overhead through the armored window of the vehicle. The thick lines crossed one another in endless patterns, disappearing between damaged buildings and telephone poles. He made sure to give them a good view. He did not know what they were. He had never known. There had always been an audience. Ever since he was young, he had felt them watching from somewhere beyond ordinary sight. Sometimes he imagined them above him, sometimes behind his eyes, sometimes standing in places that were empty whenever he looked directly at them. He had learned not to react. Most people would have called the feeling paranoia. A doctor might have called it a disorder. Maxim called it an audience because the word felt more accurate. An audience did not simply watch. It waited to see what the person on stage would do next. Maxim had spent his entire life performing for them. As the vehicle moved through the ruined streets, he turned his head slowly allowing them to see the anti-drone nets, the empty windows, and the burned remains of cars abandoned near the roadside. The audience liked war. At least that was what he had started to believe. "We're coming up to the strong point now, Capitan," the driver said. The young soldier's voice pulled Maxim away from his thoughts. Their vehicle was a donated, mine-resistant armored truck. The letters and numbers painted on its side had been covered with Ukrainian markings, but the original foreign instructions were still visible inside. Loose equipment shook against the metal walls as they moved. The driver leaned close to the windshield, scanning the sky between the buildings. Everyone watched the sky now. A tiny drone could appear without warning, no larger than a bird at first. Seconds later, it could dive toward a vehicle, a doorway, or a group of soldiers. Sometimes the first sign was the buzzing sound. Sometimes there was no warning at all. The MRAP turned sharply and skidded to a stop in front of a partially destroyed apartment building. The upper floors had been hit by something large. One side of the structure had collapsed, leaving a mountain of debris across what had once been the parking area. The lower entrance remained mostly intact, though half the front wall had been torn away. "Take that stairwell and go down," the driver said. His eyes never left the sky. "They're waiting in the basement." Maxim reached for the door handle. "Will you stay nearby?" The driver gave a nervous laugh. "Not here." That was answer enough. Maxim opened the heavy door and jumped down onto the street. The vehicle pulled away almost before he had closed it. Its tires threw dust and small pieces of broken glass behind it as it accelerated down the road. Maxim ran toward the building. He passed through the bombed-out entrance and entered the stairwell. The darkness wrapped around him at once. He stopped there to catch his breath. The stairwell smelled of wet concrete, smoke, dust, and old sewage. A broken pipe had leaked somewhere below, leaving dark stains on the walls. He listened. Outside, the armored vehicle's engine faded into the distance. He heard no buzzing drone, and no footsteps following them. Still, he waited several heartbeats longer. A drone could remain high above, watching the entrance. It could send his location to artillery crews or wait until he came back outside. When he was satisfied that nothing had followed him, he continued downstairs. At the top of the stairwell, the building looked like any other ruin in the city. That was the point. No radio antenna marked it. No military vehicles were parked outside. No soldiers stood near the entrance. To anyone watching from the air, it appeared abandoned. As Maxim descended, however, the temperature began to change. Normally, a basement in a damaged building would be colder than the floors above it. This one became warmer with every step. Someone was running a heater behind the door at the bottom. The warmth was comforting, but it also made Maxim uneasy. Heat meant life. Heat could be seen by the right equipment. He reached the basement door and paused. Surprising frightened soldiers inside a hidden position was a good way to be shot. He knocked 3 times. "I am Ukrainian," he shouted immediately. The reaction on the other side was instant. Boots scraped across the floor. Someone knocked over a metal object. A weapon was lifted, followed by the clear sound of a rifle being cocked. "Who are you?" a voice demanded. "Capitan Maxim Sirko. You are," he replied. Silence followed. Maxim could imagine the soldiers exchanging looks. Intelligence officers were not always welcome near the front. They arrived with questions, secret orders, and requests that usually meant trouble. A lock clicked, then another. The door opened slowly. A rifle barrel appeared first. Behind it stood an older soldier with a tired face and a thick gray beard. Around him were 11 or 12 other men crowded into the basement. They were surrounded by ammunition crates, batteries, radios, drone equipment, medical bags, and tangled cables. The air smelled of fuel, damp clothing, cigarettes, and strong instant coffee. The oldest soldier lowered his rifle slightly. He looked to be in his early 50s, though Maxim knew that meant little here. War aged people quickly. A man could arrive looking 30 and leave looking 60, assuming he left at all. Sergeant Boyko, 63rd Brigade, the man said. He made a weak attempt at a salute, though his expression made it clear that respect was not what he felt. You intelligence ghosts always arrive without warning? I apologize for the intrusion, Maxim said. I am working according to a schedule, and there was no time to send notice. What kind of work? Classified. Boyko looked back at the soldiers behind him.